First, just be mindful of breathing in and out. And so now, as part of the close mindfulness, or the close placement of mindfulness on feeling, bring to mind a strong, pleasant feeling you experienced sometime in the past that gave rise to strong craving. Try to relive that type of feeling to the best of your ability. May have been a pleasant physical feeling, or mental feeling, or both. And then try to be mindful of how that feeling of pleasure gave rise to craving. Of an awareness that wishes to have more of that type of pleasant experience. craves more of the same type. And then check whether it is truly the case that every time there's a pleasant experience, it is followed by the wish for more. The case of pleasant tastes, pleasant sounds, so check whether any time there's a pleasant sense perception, your mind reacts with grasping or craving for more. And similarly, when we experience mental pleasure, as a result of being praised, being promoted, making more money, does our mind get attached to the particular feeling, and more importantly to the object that triggers that feeling? Check all the objects you crave or you attach to. Can you detect the pleasant feeling that gives rise to those mental states? And then focus on unpleasant feelings. Do they give rise to anger, aversion, resentment? Can you see a correlation between your anger or resentment and an unpleasant feeling that preceded that resentment? And then check, even in the case of unpleasant feelings giving rise to anger, aversion, or resentment, is there craving involved in that process? Craving for pleasure, comfort, gain, praise, and so forth. And if we're honest, doesn't revolve our entire existence around the craving for pleasant experiences, and the craving for the absence of unpleasant experiences. And once these pleasant experiences arise, they induce further craving. For that feeling to continue. And possibly increase. And so we're basically imprisoned. We're bound by our craving for pleasure. And so we're preoccupied or spend our entire life looking after our body to provide it with pleasant sense experiences. And running after pleasant mental experiences. In the meantime, creating so much suffering for ourselves and others. And so now to conclude this short meditation, in order for it to sink deeper to a more emotional level, utilize your alertness and your mindfulness to focus on whatever emotional state has arisen as a result of analyzing, feeling and craving. Okay, so having basically put into practice the first type of close mindfulness, focusing on the body, the second close mindfulness, focusing on feelings, now we need to focus on mind, on emptiness, and for that, this may be helpful. Well, looking at Shantideva's text, go to page 4. Well, basically what Shantideva does, again, he focuses on body, mind, feelings, and so forth, but he now looks at their ultimate nature. How do these phenomena exist? So after everything we've done so far, you may get a sense that with mindfulness in general, but more specifically in the case of close placement of mindfulness, which means you generate an understanding of something related to body, feeling, mind, and phenomena other than those four. And then you use mindfulness to internalize your understanding. That's basically what the practice of close placement of mindfulness refers to. Now, taking those four, body and so forth, body, feeling, mind, and phenomena, well, any characteristic, any attribute can be taken to mind. We focus more specifically with the body on the limited nature of the body, with feeling on the fact that it's in the nature of suffering, so that it gives rise to afflictions and so forth. We focused on the fact that mind is impermanent, but we can take anything to mind. We can take any attribute, impermanence, suffering, nature, and more importantly, what we really need to take to mind is the ultimate nature of those four aspects. So how does the body exist? How does feeling exist? How does mind exist? And how do other phenomena exist? So that's what Shantideva analyzes here. Because when we say the body does such and such, it gives rise to this and this problem, we automatically have a sense it does so intrinsically. There's an inherent body, there's something intrinsic, and that's this troublemaker. And then there's feeling, it's intrinsically this. We have this tendency right away, the explanation that is found in the Buddhist text, an explanation of the conventional reality, right away to believe it's absolute. This is absolute. So everything we learn, the Four Noble Truths, the suffering nature of phenomena, the disadvantages of afflictions, well, how do those things actually exist? How do they exist from the point of view of their ultimate mode of existence, if you like? If you analyze the object, what is there actually? What do we actually find? And so, here what Shantideva does, he first checks, what is the body? We say the body is that which gives rise to suffering, was that which is the result of our afflictions. So we have this limited body. But how does the body actually exist? Does it exist the way it appears? So we say the suffering of suffering needs to be understood, right? Which is referring to the body. Sorry, not the suffering. The suffering nature. So the truth of suffering needs to be understood. What we need to do with the first truth is to understand it. Okay? So by understanding the body, we understand the truth of suffering. But how does the body actually exist? Is there something that can be understood? Is there actually an ultimately existent body, ultimately existent truth of suffering? No, actually no. So there seems to be a contradiction here. On one hand, we make such a big fuss about suffering and we should overcome it. But the only reason we have this suffering is because we don't understand the actual nature of the body, the actual nature of feeling and so forth, which then give rise to the afflictions, which cause then the kind of body, who creates the kind of body we have and so forth. Does that make sense? So, therefore we need to look, how does the body really exist? How does feeling really exist? How does the mind actually exist? And how do all other phenomena exist? And so this is where I want to introduce you to another presentation in the Mahayana, where Shantideva, or part of Shantideva's text, he addresses the four types of mindfulness, but looks at their ultimate nature. How do they really exist? So if you look at page 4, first you have verse 78 and 79. So what do we do? What is done in those two verses? Well, Shantideva is analyzing what is the body. Right? What is the body? This body we have. What is that body? How does it exist? Seems very clear. You look at your body in the mirror, or you look down at yourself. Oh, there's my body. There seems something very solidly there. Something, of course, we consider to be pleasurable, or we attach to. Like I said early on, with regard to the self we're attached to, it better be there. It better exist the way it appears to us. So this thing we consider to be so important, so precious, this body, we consider that to be clean, something desirable, but how does it exist? Where is that body to be found? So we're looking at parts of the body, of course, but what of those parts? Which of those parts is the body? So that's the question he asks you. So basically asks in the sense of asking this question and coming to the conclusion, the body is neither the feet. It's neither the feet, nor the calves, nor is it the thighs, nor the hips. The abdomen and back are also not the body, nor is the body the chest, or the arms, nor the arms, right? So none of those parts are the body. I think we all agree on that, right? What is the body? So going through everything that makes up the body, none of those parts are the body. The ribs and hands are not the body, nor are the armpits. So random. Anyway, it says armpits. Nor the shoulders are the body. Bowels or entrails are not the body. If the head and the throat are also not the body, so what is then the body? I think we can all agree on that. Body is none of those parts. It's none of those. Okay? So it's none of those individually. All right. So if it's none of those, does it exist separate from those? If it's all of those, you have a problem. That's the only thing we basically come up with. Either it is each one of those parts. Well, obviously it's not. Right? We read this and go, yeah, big deal. The body is not the hands. It's not the... So it's none of those individual parts. It doesn't exist separately, because if it did, although we have a instinctive sense, it's something separate from them. Honestly, if we check, the body has two hands. So the way I express it, our mind right away latches onto something, an owner of the hands. Right? When I say this flower has beautiful leaves. So there's a flower that has beautiful leaves. Okay? Right away there's a sense of separation. The flower that has nice leaves, or a nice blossom, right? Or a nice stem, whatever, nice color. So similarly with the body. Okay? So for the sake of convenience, we talk about the arms of the body. But the mental image we get is that of a body that owns hands and feet, etc. Right? Can you kind of get in touch with your own notion of such a body? But of course, if you think it through further, we come to the conclusion, no way. Because if there was such an owner of those parts, the thighs, the calves, the head, and so forth, we could remove those parts and find that owner. And of course, that's impossible. So if you remove those parts, if there was something separate from the parts, you can remove the parts and we'll still have something. And that's of course not possible. So but definitely this notion that there is a body that owns those parts, that's a wrong perception. Pretty obvious. And none of the parts are the body. But the collection is just as bad. The collection, if the body is the collection, all of those, well, all of those are many and the body's just one. And also if one of those is sick, well, all of those would have to be sick. The whole body, because the body is all of those parts. So if one of those parts is sick, I say the body is sick, then everything has to be sick, because the body is all those parts. Right? So when I have a headache, I end up having a toe ache. Right? Sometimes the example of a car works a little better. What is the car? Same idea. Is it separate from the parts? Does it exist as as being each one of those parts, and the tendency is no, it's all of those parts. Well, great. When the car breaks down, all those parts have to break down? No one would say that. If the engine is broken, the car is broken. But if the car is all the parts, the collection of the parts, then all parts have to be broken. Otherwise, what do you mean with the collection of the parts? What do you mean with all of those parts? If the car is all of those parts and the car is broken, all of those parts are broken. End of story. Okay? If you burn your body, everything must be burned. So burning your arm is no longer qualified to say, I burned my body. I burned myself. It wouldn't work. Because the body is all of those parts. So again, not okay. So if you really analyze that which a moment earlier was very clearly there, his body, my body, not big deal, I'm attached to this and not to the other person. If we look a little closer, cannot be found. So, it's none of those. It's none of those. It says in verse 78 and 79, that's pretty clear. Then 80 says, if the entire body is present within its segments, within its parts, and its parts are present in their parts, then where does the unitary body itself reside? We talk about one body, there's a sense one body. So, does the body exist as partially distributed among all of its parts? Or is it entirely contained in each of its parts? Right? Seems to be a silly question, but in a way it's like, come on, I perceive one body, unitary body, I'm attached to it. I think it's more important than your body. Well, I better get to understand what it is I'm so attached to. I guess if I wasn't attached to it, big deal. But because I'm very clear about what is more precious, what is more important, well, I need to make sure that the thing I consider to be more important and I harm, for the sake of which I harm others and myself, better be there. So let's look closer. So another example, instead of taking the body, which is even harder to understand, is time. Time. 1 year. 1 year. What is 1 year? It's made up of parts. It's made up of parts, right? But again, does this 1 year exist as partially distributed among the 6, 7, 12 months? Is there 1 month? Is there 1 year contained in each of its parts? There's none of those. Does 1 year exist separate from the 12 months? Again, it doesn't. Right? And though we say 1 year consists of 365 days, I only need to remove 1 day and I no longer have 1 year. So basically, after New Year, what's that? New Year, is that Purim? Is it Yom Kippur? Rosh Hashanah. Okay. Rosh Hashanah. Yeah. Rosh Hashanah. So all it needs is the day after Rosh Hashanah. You no longer have 1 year, because you only have 364 days left. So although 1 year lasts 12 months, after a day, 1 year is gone. Huh? What's going on? It's only one day long. So that's one of the debates we usually do. So a second after New Year. You have 365 days minus 1 second. By definition, you no longer have 1 year. So 1 year is over after 1 second. So likewise with the body, this complete body, right? In order to have this particular body, you need all its parts. But if I chop off my finger, that particular body is gone. So with 1 finger gone, I no longer have this body. What's going on? I thought I needed all those parts. But I don't. For it to go out of existence, 1 part missing, that's enough. So you see how all these things are very confusing. They're only confusing because of our misperception of the body. If I ask you, point at my body, do you see my body? You would all go, yes, yes, I do. But actually, you're all seeing something that is not my body. You're seeing the front of my body. That's not my body. Right? And still you would insist, I see your body. I ask you to point at this flower, and you point at something that is not the flower. In fact, you cannot point at something actually that is the flower. Why is this so confusing? Why is this like, what are you doing? Why? That's weird. There seems to be, it's only because of our misperception of the flower in the first place, our misperception of the body in the first place. Oh, I'm so sure about looking at this body. I'm so sure about, but when I check again, suddenly it's no longer really the case, right? Okay. Anyway, so going back to the body, therefore, the thing I'm attached to, the thing that I pleasure, that I what's the word? That I cherish so much, the thing that I look after very well, etc. I'm attached to. So what is it? If the entire body is present within its parts, and its parts are present in their parts, then where does that body itself reside? So it's just a clutter of parts, a collection of parts. Where's that body? Okay. That appears so clearly. If one's entire body were located in the hands and other limbs, there would be as many bodies as parts, such as the hand and so forth. Right? If I were to say the body is just each of those parts, well, I end up with lots of bodies. That doesn't make sense. Pretty clear. If the body is neither inside nor outside its parts, how can it be in the hands and so forth? That wouldn't make sense. It's neither inside nor outside. If the body is not different from the hands, etc., how can it possibly exist? Now, many of you have heard, of course, it's merely imputed, merely imputed. The problem is when you already know that, you go, it's easy. Well, in the sense that you answer those questions by saying it's merely imputed. But the problem is you're totally ignoring the body that appears to you. That's not the merely imputed body. The body you're attached to, in case of your own body or another person's body, that is not the merely imputed body. That is a body that seems to be unitary, an entity that exists in and of itself, not in relation to something other than itself. It seems to be their absolute, not in relation to something other than itself. So if that body really existed, so usually the way to go about it is to allow this to appear. Think of your body. Think of your own attachment to your own body. Like if someone thank you. If someone comes up to you and says, I want to chop off a part. I want to chop off a part of this tree. All right, go ahead. Oh no, I changed my mind. I want to chop off a part of your body. Oh, wait a minute. So very different reaction because of our sense of this body. And then take that body, that appearing body. How does it appear? How does it appear? Okay, so this is exactly what Shantideva does here. So I'm afraid time is up. Well, if I don't take as much to talk about your in-between session job, I can go back to it, and someone please remind me once it's time for dinner. But just to make sure I use this time. So what I would like you to do is once you leave the hall here, when you go to dinner, as you walk, please just be aware of your feeling of pleasure, feeling of displeasure, and neutral feeling. Okay, sense perception. So as you walk, is there an itch? Is there a headache? Is there a pleasant feeling? And then great, once you walk into the dining room, you don't like the food, wonderful. Good opportunity to become aware of your unpleasant feeling. Someone scratches the chair on the ground. Pleasant or unpleasant. Right? Just watch your own feelings. So this is something I don't need to guide you through as like the next step using the Four Noble Truths, but just observing without judgment, just noting pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling. Even without allowing craving or anger to arise, just watch it. Okay? Especially with mental feeling. I think what is a very good example is moods. In Tibetan, you don't have a word for it. Mood. Bad mood, good mood. There's no word. I wouldn't even know how to say it. I would say like, I don't feel good today. That's the Tibetan equivalent for saying I'm in a bad mood. Doesn't mean Tibetans are not in a bad mood. They just don't have a word for it. But that's a very interesting phenomenon. Good mood, bad mood. right? Where does that come from? That's a prolonged feeling of pleasure, a prolonged feeling of displeasure. So watching that gives you it's a great opportunity to watch your feeling. Just watching the feeling. Okay? Anyway, so hopefully you wake up with a bad mood or a good mood tomorrow morning, so it gives you some constant, something to look at for a longer period of time at least. So please, this should be your in-between session activity. So thanks good for silence, otherwise you'll be too preoccupied. So you have the opportunity, just keep your mindfulness. So this is what you do here. You generate mindfulness, okay, alertness initially, and in order to keep the object, mindfulness is at work. And to check whether your alertness and your mindfulness are still at work, you need introspection. We can all do that, right? Okay, just do that. That's your job. May sound boring, but I'm sure the closer you look, the more interesting you'll find your own feelings. Okay. All right, that was quick. 3 minutes. So please, again, at exactly 6 o'clock, please let me know, because I don't want to go over time. So, okay, great. Now going back to here, checking the 4 aspects, body, etc., from the point of view of their actual nature. So, I guess verse 82, we got to 82. I don't think, is there anything that's not clear? No, it's pretty straightforward. Okay. Now it goes on with 83. So why do we perceive this body? Why do we perceive the body in a way in which it cannot exist? That's the question, right? Well, because there's certain causes and conditions there. There's certain causes and conditions. So basically our misperception, our deeply ingrained, our habitual misperception of phenomena. We just can't help it, right? So here, therefore there is no body. There is no true, absolute body, although it appears to be there. There appears to be an absolute, some kind of owner of the parts, some entity we call the body. And it's owing to confusion that the notion of the hands, etc., being the body is conceived. Just as on account of a specific shape, there's the notion that a scarecrow is a human. Actually, the Tibetan word for scarecrow is not really a scarecrow. It's a pile of stones. But basically in Tibet, scarecrows were like, they made piles of stones. And so the word is really a pile of stone. But since it is used like a scarecrow, so you use that word. So I was kind of tempted to use a pile of stone, but that doesn't mean much to us. So oftentimes you use the example of a scarecrow or a pile of stones appears to be a person. Scarecrow. Yeah, I'm sure. There's so much agriculture. I'm sure you have scarecrows. What is the word? Tagli? Dakhli. Never mind. Lachlil. Lachlil. Okay, lachlil. That sounded Arabic, no? Okay, anyway. All right. So, that is the notion of the hands. So it's just on account of a specific shape. So there's certain causes and conditions that give rise to the notion of a scarecrow being a person. So likewise, it's causes and conditions, and one of the main causes is our misperception of reality that gives rise to that wrong perception. There's nothing found in the object that would justify that. It's coming from our own mind. So again, it is our own mind that creates our perception of reality, with our perception of reality being mixed with the sense of inherent existence. So again, what we perceive cannot objectively exist, because what we perceive has an aspect of wrong perception, has an aspect of an appearance that is not rooted in reality. So not only does the table appear to me, but the table appeared to me as if it existed objectively. So no way I can perceive objects as they really exist, because that mistaken appearance is part of my perception. Okay. As long as the conditions are assembled, the body will appear to be human, or a human will appear to be human in the sense as in and of itself human. Nothing to do with my labeling it such, with my mind assisting me or being a condition that is responsible for me perceiving it as such, it seems to be independently to be a human body. And that is due to my misperception that I have that sense. As long as the hands, etc., are likewise present, a body will appear therein. So, with this misperception as the main cause, then all the parts, when they appear to us as if there was an intrinsic body. Okay. So, therefore, the body it does not exist as separate from the parts, and it's not the collection of the parts, as it says here. Likewise, since it is a collection of fingers, the hand does not exist as such. So, taking the body, you can take the body, does not exist separate from the parts, not each one of those parts, and not the collection of the parts. And the same is true with the hands. Each individual segment or each individual limb. Again, if you look for that thing itself, you only find parts that are not that particular object. Does that make sense? So if you look for the hands, you find parts that are not the hand. Okay? All right. And so here when we take the hand, that's actually not that difficult. It becomes more difficult when you take activities. The action of walking. Think of the activity of walking. Can you find a particular part of walking that makes up walking? No, it's just different movements of the body, and none of those can be called the action of walking. So if you look for the parts that make up walking, you won't find them. If you look at mental events in the sense of having a thought, etc. So what makes that thought? It's a continuum of different mental events. None of those is a thought. Because individually, they're not long enough to be a thought. And still, it seems to be very clear. There's this thought there. But when we look for it, we don't find it. So, therefore, everything exists of parts that are not itself. And those parts, in turn, exists of parts that are not itself, and you can divide things up endlessly. Does that make sense? And still we have such a strong sense of individual solid objects. Okay. All right. So those parts can be further split into particles, and particles divide according to direction. Since the direction also lack partless parts, particles, like space, have no inherent existence, have no true existence. It says just existence, but implied is true existence. So you can divide things up endlessly. And anything that exists, at least a physical object, any physical object, it has a location in space, somewhere. And so, therefore, it can be divided in terms of the parts it occupies in space. So therefore it's made up of parts other than itself, and you can never find something essential there. So this, many of you have heard this over and over again, but have you really meditated on that? When you take your own mind, you take your own body, when did we ever really sit down, and that's what we do tomorrow, to sit down and really reflect on it and come to the understanding that although things appear and we reinforce that perception of things every moment, when we start looking at what we perceive, we realize that's impossible. That is truly impossible. And that is basically when we get that understanding, that is a truly life-changing experience in the sense that those perceptions give rise to everything we do. And we realize a lot of what we do does not make sense. Especially our afflictions. They just don't make sense. Right? But an intellectual understanding of that is not enough. Really needs to go like, oh my God. Until now, oh my God. So much time wasted, right? Anyway, okay. So we're done. It's 6 o'clock. Let's do the dedication at the very end of this day. So I want you to go. So we'll keep the dedication. And we'll meet again. Is it 7 o'clock? 7? I thought it said 7 on my schedule. Yeah. So please go for dinner. Let the people in the kitchen not wait. And I'll see you again at 7 for a discussion or question and answers. Okay, thank you.